Thanks, Alessandra. Good morning, everyone. We are alarmed by the imminent execution in the United States of America of Kenneth Eugene Smith through the use of a novel and untested method, suffocation by nitrogen gas. This could amount to torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment under international human rights law. The UN Human Rights Office calls on Alabama state authorities to halt Smith's execution, which is scheduled for the 25th, 26th of January, and to refrain from taking steps towards any other executions in this manner. Alabama already sought to execute Smith unsuccessfully by lethal injection in 2022. Smith also has ongoing proceedings in federal court against his upcoming execution, proceedings which have not been finally resolved. Nitrogen gas has never been used in the United States to execute human beings. The American Veterinary Medical Association recommends giving even large animals a sedative when being euthanized in this manner, while Alabama's protocol for execution by nitrogen asphyxiation makes no provision for sedation of human beings prior to execution. The protocol also refers to the odorless and colorless gas being administered for up to 15 minutes. Smith has also advanced with expert evidence that such an execution by gas asphyxiation in his case results in particular pain and suffering. We have serious concerns that Smith's execution in these circumstances could breach the prohibition on torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, as well as his right to effective remedies. These are rights that are set out in 2 international human rights treaties that the U.S. is bound by. These include the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. The Human Rights Committee, which is the UN body charged with monitoring implementation of the covenant, has also criticized the use of asphyxiation by gas as an execution method, the use of untested methods, as well as widening the use of the death penalty in states that continue to apply it. The death penalty is inconsistent with the fundamental right to life. There is an absence of proof that it deters crime, and it creates an unacceptable risk of executing innocent people. Rather than inventing new ways to implement capital punishment, we urge all states to put in place a moratorium on its use as a step towards universal abolition.
Thank you very much, Ravina, for this quite chilling briefing, I should say. Okay, let's start with Emma. Emma Farge.
Hi, Ravina. Have you also written to U.S. authorities saying this, and what have you said, and which ones? And I'm sorry, I don't know the backstory of his case, but how can an execution fail? What happened there?
Thanks, Emma. The details are really sobering and almost difficult to talk about. Well, Mr. Smith was 22 years old when he was charged with capital murder. After trials and appeals, he was finally convicted of capital murder. A jury voted to recommend life sentence, but a judge overruled that and imposed the death penalty on him. They attempted to execute him by lethal injection, and they spent more than an hour trying and failed. It was a botched execution. This is what had happened. And now he is set to be subjected to this very untested method, which could amount to torture, cruel, or inhuman degrading treatment under international law.
Yeah, Jeremy.
Hi, Ravina. I'd like to come back to the reason why someone would use this gas for an execution, because I'm not sure I understand exactly why would the authorities in Alabama would use this method precisely.
It's a good question. Now, the UN position is very clear. We are against the death penalty. We are against people being killed, for having committed crimes. There is an absence of evidence that this deters crime in any way. On the other side, there is a lot of evidence that the death penalty has been used in cases of miscarriages of justice, that it is used against people who later turn out to be innocent, that it's used disproportionately against minorities in the US, against people of African descent. It's disproportionately used against people who don't have the means to defend themselves with proper legal representation of their choosing. So any method of execution we are against for all those reasons. This particular method is untested. The reason perhaps that Alabama has resorted to this method is that states have had increasing trouble accessing the drugs that are needed for lethal injections. So they're resorting to looking for novel, untested methods to execute people rather than actually applying sanctions that work and that are more humane and in line with international human rights law.
Let me go to the platform. Lisa?
Thanks. Hi, Ravina. I may have missed it. What date is the execution is supposed to take place? And then also, I'm not sure you answered Emma's question about whether you've had direct contact with either the federal authorities or actually with the people in Alabama, those who are, the governor's office and that sort of thing. Have you had direct contact with them? And then I'm wondering, since the United States has ratified the conventions against torture and so forth, these international conventions, then this is a federal power, and there is a separation in the United States between the federal authorities and the state authorities. So does the United States government, federal government, have any power to over the Alabama decision on what it is to do? Can it actually tell it not to go ahead with this execution or not? Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. So 3 questions. The execution is scheduled for the 25th, 26th of January, depending on the time zone that we're talking about. I believe it's the 25th of January in Alabama. On whether we've raised the issue, I'm sorry, yes, indeed, Emma, I didn't answer your question. This is an issue that we have raised repeatedly with the government, the federal authorities of the United States. As you pointed out, Lisa, there is the federal-state distinction to make. At the federal level, there is actually an existing moratorium on the use of the death penalty, which we welcome and which we would, encourage to actually be a step towards universal abolition of the death penalty. The death penalty still is applied in 37 states have abolished the death penalty. Or not carried out an execution in more than a decade. So this is also very welcome. Unfortunately, we have, in addition to Alabama, 2 other states, Mississippi and Oklahoma, that have approved this new untested method of using nitrogen to execute people. And a bill to approve this method has also been presented in Nebraska. So it is worrying that this is gaining ground as a method of execution. I think on the appeal, on what the federal level can do. In fact, Mr. Smith has an appeal pending. He has ongoing proceedings in a federal court against his upcoming execution. And these are proceedings which have not been fully resolved. This is why we are also raising his right to an effective remedy. These appeals need to be exhausted. These proceedings in the federal court also need to be exhausted, and the execution certainly should not be carried out until that has happened.
Nick.
Yeah, thank you. Ravina, just to be clear, when you say you've raised it with federal authorities, with who? Is that with the Ministry of Department of Justice, or exactly which organizations have you discussed this with? And when you say also that it's tested, are you also saying then that it's never been used in any other situations or any other countries, so far as you're aware? Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. It's clear. I think the American Bar Association has said that it has never been used in the United States. Whether it's been used anywhere in the world, To our knowledge, it has not. Now, of course, you know very well that the use of the death penalty in many countries is mired in secrecy. There's a real lack of transparency. So I can't say definitively whether it's been used anywhere else or not. But to our knowledge, it has not been used. It is untested. On how we raise our concerns and at which level and with which ministry, well, which department in the case of the U.S., it's complicated. We have, for example, the UN Human Rights Committee that I referred to. They raised this in the review of the US before the committee. So that is raised with the delegation that's in the room. It's raised, at the federal level with whoever is representing the government at that moment. We are, of course, in frequent contact with the permanent mission of the U.S. here. Now, on this specific case of Mr. Smith, I don't know. It's not clear to me whether that has been raised with the authorities. But generally, this issue has been raised repeatedly with the U.S. authorities.
Any other question to Ravina? I don't see any. So thank you very much, Ravina. And let's hope. Sure, of course.
Just to flag, you have all received a press release on Ukraine that was put out by our office in Kyiv. If you have any further questions on that, please feel free to reach out to us. You will have seen that there is a marked increase in civilian casualties as the Russian Federation has intensified missile and drone attacks across Ukraine. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, Taha, sorry, I didn't see you.
Do you have any update on Sudan's situation?
Thanks for raising it. This really is a conflict which has had such devastating impact on civilians, both in terms of people killed, millions displaced, ongoing concerns about sexual violence, and many other human rights violations. We are now in the 9th month. I believe yesterday was the 9th month mark since this conflict began. The High Commissioner has been very clear in his call to all parties to cease hostilities and to ensure the protection of civilians, to take all feasible precautions to minimize, in any case, harm, including attacks on civilians and civilian objects, to release all those who are arbitrarily detained, to immediately seize the use of landmines and other explosive ordnance that is clearly prohibited. So, no, thank you for raising your question about this situation, which I would encourage everyone to report on much more. We're happy to provide more information if you would like.
And just to add the emergency relief coordinator, our USG, Martin Griffiths, that was here yesterday and also mentioned Sudan, not to forget it in the current dire situation. Well, Mr. Griffiths, USG Griffiths has allocated $10 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to support men, women and children fleeing from Sudan to the neighboring country, South Sudan. They've also said that we are anticipating thousands of additional peoples that may cross the borders into South Sudan from Sudan over the next 6 months, stressing a system that is already under stress. Coming from Sudan just in the past month, there were about 60,000 people who fled and arrived in South Sudan. So this is a very large number of people crossing in very short time. And starting since mid-April, about 500,000 people have crossed into South Sudan from Sudan. So it's a very dire situation also for the refugees. Lisa.
Yeah, just very quickly, Ravina, on the execution, two things. I received the press release on Ukraine, but not on Alabama. I don't know why, but please, I need that. And also, there was, I think within the past week or two, there was another expert committee that actually came out with a very strong press release regarding this execution. I've lost that. I would be interested in getting that as well. If you do you know what that is, and can it be sent to me?
Absolutely, Lisa. The Special Procedures Mandate holders issued a press release on this as well. We'll send you that, and the briefing notes should be following very shortly.
It's not yet there.